Welcome back to the Successful Farming Podcast. In today's episode, Lorrie Boyer talks with Andrew Coppin, CEO of Ranchbot, to talk about remote water monitoring, the economic realities of today's cattle industry, and why technology will shape the ranches of tomorrow. Today's podcast is brought to you by Morton Buildings. Built stronger, lasts longer, looks better. Visit mortonbuildings.com. Have you ever noticed that the longest lasting and best looking ag buildings in rural America have that one thing in common? They all have that recognizable Morton Buildings M logo on them. That's because a Morton building is built stronger, lasts longer, and looks better than other post-frame buildings. So if you need equipment storage, an insulated workshop, or a building for dairy, livestock, or even a farm retail business, contact Morton Buildings at mortonbuildings.com and create your own farm building that will last for generations.
I'm talking with Andrew Coppin here today on the show. He is a cattle industry specialist and co-founder and CEO of a company called Ranchbot, which is a company that developed a remote water tank monitoring technology. Thank you so much for joining me here today, Andrew. I'm excited to learn more about Ranchbot. How did you get your start in the cattle industry, and what led you into inventing Ranchbot?
Yes, I grew up in Australia, and our family had ranching and farming operations that I spent my share of time on, and, spent a lot of time driving around checking water that 95% of the time didn't need checking for the 5% of times that it does. I didn't know at the time that that would lead me to be involved in a company that was solving that problem, because I subsequently went on and had a career in finance and funds management for 25 years. And then 10 years ago, I met my co-founder, Craig, who was working on remote monitoring solutions, and we sort of started the company in Australia called FarmBot. We had the usual trials and tribulations, a few near-death experiences along the startup path and trying to work out what problems we were trying to solve. Fast forward to today, and, we're on about 5,000 ranches across Australia and the United States, and I now live here in Fort Worth in Texas.
We will be talking specifically about Ranchbot here in just a few moments, but what made you choose Texas? What took you from Australia into Texas versus other areas in the U.S.?
We'd been running FarmBot in Australia for a few years, and obviously Australia is a pretty harsh place, so we were satisfied that the technology was going to stand up, and I'd been coming and going from the United States researching the challenge of water problems in ranching, and just felt I needed to be living here and waking up here every day to really be deeply invested in the problems for US ranchers. And so we started a manufacturing facility here. We build Ranchbot in America for America, and we've opened a headquarters here in Fort Worth. The key drivers of that decision were that we could travel from here to Australia direct. Fort Worth is Cowtown at the end of the day. It's steep history in ranching, and also I'm surrounded by some of the best universities for ranch management and animal welfare here. So we've got a lot of young, smart people who are from ranching families at places like TCU and Texas Tech and Texas A&M, where we're going to hire a lot of people over the coming years to work in technology for ranching. So that was key to the decision making.
Okay, well, that makes sense. So tell me, what exactly is Ranchbot?
So, Ranchbot's a remote monitoring and control company. The problem we initially set out to solve was remote water monitoring, because, on any given day, it's 100 degrees here in Fort Worth today. Across vast tracts of land between here and the California coast, it's going to be over 100 degrees. And you're going to have, over 500,000 ranchers driving around to check water that 95% of the time doesn't need checking, but they're doing it for the 5% of times that it does. And there's a huge cost of this to society and to the industry that's not really well understood, and it doesn't appear in the P&Ls of any ranching operation. Driving to check, isn't that just part of the job? What if we could give ranchers real-time visibility around their water assets, so they could wake up in the morning over a coffee and decide, do I actually need to go and check anything today or don't I? And that was the problem that we solved, and we're now doing that in about 30,000 locations for 5,000 odd ranches. So once we solved that problem and solved it really well, people started asking us about other problems they had, like, could you turn my pump on and off remotely without me having to go there? Or could you tell me what the weather is or the rainfall is in my pastures? And so we've started to connect all these other things to Ranchbot that are things that ranchers want to know. They want to know flow rates in the well. They want to know pressure in the system. They want to know rainfall and temperature and humidity, and they want to know if their pump is on or off or not. So it's all about automation of the ranch. And I guess, more recently, as we've expanded the products from water monitoring, it's sort of like become the remote control for your ranch, if you like.
Andrew, how do you visually explain what Ranchbot is?
So, key to the evolution of our products was we knew we had to create a device that was nature-proof, that could live through really hot and really cold temperatures. We knew we had to be something that we could send to ranchers and have them open it, not read the instructions because they wouldn't, and it had to be intuitive in how you could install it. So essentially, we made our products like 4 screws on the top of the water storage or wherever you're going to install the device, and a probe that measures the weight of water to within about 1/4 of an inch accuracy. Put that in the water, turn it on, it's got to work anywhere. So that sort of sounds sort of easy, but it's hard to do it with a device that's got its own power and its own communications, and you want it to watch what's happening all day long, but only tell you when there's a problem when there's a problem. So key to our innovation and our success was that we decided we would do satellite direct, so that cellular communications would no longer be an issue, or because satellite works everywhere and is very reliable. So we used 2 US-based companies for our satellite communications, Global Star and Viasat, depending upon what solutions we're solving. But yes, this simplicity of installation and being intuitive about how it will work, we sort of pride ourselves that a day worker on a ranch can install our technology in 10 minutes because it's so easy to do. We wanted to avoid the words that no rancher wants to hear, and that is, we'll send a technician. That's someone to leave the gate open, someone to start a fire, someone to get bogged. So it's got to be intuitive, it's got to be easy, and these devices are all self-contained with power and communication in them.
Andrew, do you actually sell the Ranchbot versus leasing it? And how does it work with your software?
We actually sell the hardware to the rancher, and the price varies from about $600 to $1,500, depending upon what solution you're looking for. And then they run at about $1 a day. So you think you don't get too far in the F250 for $1 these days. So even if you've got 10 watering locations, water points across the ranch, $10 a day, it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars in time and wear and tear on motor vehicle and gas to go and check 10 watering points. And even after you've checked them, 1 minute later, you don't know what's happening. Whereas this way, you know what's happening instantly. When you've got a problem, when a cow jumps in the trough and knocks off the float, when a pipe bursts, if there's no water there, if the pump's not running, you can know all of these things without even having to go there. And, strange as it may seem, go to problems when there are problems, not drive to check that which does not need checking.
You mentioned, Andrew, that the Ranchbot is a probe that goes into the actual water tank. Can you give us some more details on how it actually works?
We have 2 main products, Ranchbot and Ranchbot Lite. Ranchbot Lite is just a product simply for monitoring water storages, the 5,000-gallon poly tank or the 20,000-gallon steel rim. So we've got devices just for monitoring water storages. We've got devices like Trough Direct, which is just for monitoring drinkers where cattle are drinking out of, and it talks directly to the satellite. And we've got the Ranchbot itself, which is a device that can monitor water, but it can also be the device to turn pumps on and off, monitor weather and rainfall, monitor water pressure and water flow. So they're the sort of 3 key products that we have, Ranchbot, Ranchbot Lite, and our Trough products. And they're to cater for the differing needs of different ranches with different operations. No one can afford to lose water anymore. We need to know where it is. If you're going direct from the well to the trough, then you need to monitor the trough. If you're going from a well to a storage on top of a hill and letting gravity feed the water, you need to monitor the pipes and the water storage to make sure you don't have leaks. It's optional for ranchers, depending upon terrain and the distance to travel, as to whether they want to do remote control of things like pumps and pipes. I mean, a lot of ranchers in America have ranches in different locations. They don't have contiguous land holdings. You might have one in one part of the county and one is 50 miles away in another county. So you can't be two places at once. And water problems only ever happen where you were yesterday, or Friday night, 11 o'clock on your wife's birthday or something. So water problems are always at the most inconvenient times. And so knowing when you've got them, when you actually have them and you need to go, is really critical to our service and our products.
What about the software? How does that work with the Ranchbot, Andrew?
We have a web app that the devices talk to, and you can log in there and look at all of your water storages, your drinkers, your tanks, your pumps, your pipes. We use a traffic light system of flags, which red is bad, green is good, orange is something's not quite right. So we have about 12,000 people now logging in every week, looking at their ranch on this platform, on their cell phone or on their desktop at the ranch headquarters, and knowing what they've got to do today before they even finish their first coffee. So the days of sort of getting up and just getting in the truck and starting the drive to check things are not necessary. You're going to be a lot better to be able to look at it and make decisions about what you do and don't need, go to problems that are problems. And otherwise you get, more time to do all the jobs on the ranch that never get done. I've never met a rancher with time on their hands. I've never met one with a bottom on the to-do list. So what we hear most is that we give ranchers time and we give them peace of mind. And I think they're two great things to give people that are busy and that are growing our food, because time is hard to get and peace of mind is something we all long for. It doesn't matter if you've got 50 cows or 500 cows or 5,000 cows. At $3,000 a head, you're worrying a lot whether they've got water or not, because if they don't, your business is going backwards.
Exactly. And Andrew, you just touched on a question I was going to ask you, and that is what your typical customer looks like.
We have people across the whole spectrum, Lorrie. What we find is that smaller ranchers, casual ranchers, often don't live there. Then they're absentee landlords, if you like. So the benefit for them is the convenience of being able to look on their phone and their cell phone at any time and know what's happening without having to go there or without having to rely on the neighbour or a friend to check up on the water, because the neighbours and the friends are often busy people as well. Then there's sort of the ma and pa rancher, which is the great breadth of America's beef industry. It's mum and dad and one of the kids. The other kid didn't come back from university. So they're always challenged for time and resources. And then there's large corporate ranchers that are growing red meat protein as a business enterprise. And obviously they're very focused around the true return on investment. They might buy 20 or 30 of our devices, but that means they're running a lot more efficient operation. Most of them we hear we're saving smaller ranchers anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 a year, and bigger ranchers I've had tell me that we're saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So it's a real benefit to their business that can be seen the day after you put it on.
Are you a farmer looking for an industry-leading farm building? A building made with the best materials and craftsmanship? Then there's only one builder for you, Morton Buildings. Morton understands the needs of every farm business, and they can create a building just for you that makes your routine activities much more efficient. And best of all, a Morton building is built stronger, lasts longer, and looks better. Contact Morton Buildings at mortonbuildings.com to create your own farm building to maximize your productivity.
Talking more about cost efficiencies, Andrew, and I know you've touched on it a couple of times during our conversation so far, but I noticed on your website that you do have a savings calculator as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one thing as ranchers, we don't necessarily, have a dollar value on our own time. We just sort of get up when the sun does and go get down when the sun goes down and then start doing our book work and other things. But the reality of our lives these days is we're going to have to try and produce more with the available land and water and resources we've got because the population's growing. We're producing an amazing product that consumers love. There's 5 burger chains on every freeway and 2 or 3 steakhouses in every town. And America's producing, super high quality product. The consumers are loving that. But as business operators, as ranchers, we're going to have to become more efficient to learn how to grow more with the available things we've got. And so I think there's been a lot of money, like billions of dollars spent on how to grow a better cow, but not a lot of money spent on how to run a better ranch, how to be more efficient. So we created the cost calculator so people could enter how many water points they have, how many miles they have to drive to check them all, what is the cost of gas, what is the cost of labour. And they can actually start to quantify what is the true cost I spend every year to drive around and check water. And for a lot of people, it's a real shock. They sort of, wow, I did not think I was spending $60,000 a year driving around to check things. And if I can reduce that number by 2/3, so I'm going to be saving $40,000 a year. And more often than not, those sort of metrics are what we hear. They can cut down the travel and the labour on checking that which does not need checking and just do it when it's important and when they want to, rather than when as part of an ongoing process. So, yeah, the savings calculator is, I think, a great way for ranchers to start thinking about what is my true costs and how can I reduce them.
Andrew, what are common questions you get from people that are looking at the Ranchbot products?
Well, most often we get asked, is it proven in the past? So we often like to put people in touch with ranchers in their area so they can hear firsthand from someone else just like them the impact. Because I would say I've had thousands of ranchers say, I wish I did this 3 to 5 years ago. Why wasn't this around then? So referrals to ranchers so they can justify it. Obviously, people want to understand the cost because there is no line in the P&L that says driving around a check. So it's a hidden cost. So often understand the economics of this is actually going to save you money, give you time, and give you a better outcome. And then it's more about just the specifics of the setup for most ranchers. Are you from a well to a trough? Are you from a well to storage? Are you gravity feeding? Are you solar pumping? So that we make sure we get the right solution for the particular operation. I like to sort of think we've got a toolkit of tools that help ranchers. And of course, you can use a wrench to bang in a nail if you have to, but it's better to use a hammer. It's better to have the right tool for the right job. So we've created this portfolio of management tools for ranchers, and they can pick and choose from them depending upon their circumstances.
Andrew, just listening to you speak, I can definitely tell you have a background and you have knowledge when it comes to the cattle industry and the ranching industry. And as I introduced you as a cattle industry specialist. So we are in unprecedented times right now in the cattle industry with prices as high as they are and consumer demand as high as it is. What is your take on everything that's going on right now?
Yes, well, I mean, it is an interesting time. And of course, the laws of supply and demand are in full swing in the perfect storm of very low supply, which has been exacerbated by the border of Mexico shutting down. So that's 1 million head of cattle that aren't coming into the country because of the potential New World screwworm issues. And the herd in the US, as you would well know, is at historical lows. We're back at the same size herd as we were in the 1950s and 1960s. But we didn't have 340 million people in 1950s and 60s, and we didn't have 25 different burger chains and 15 different steakhouse options. So, and let's face it, beef as a protein is a preferred protein for US consumers because it's a super high quality, tasty product that they love. Whether that's the burger stores or the grill out or the tailgate or whatever, everywhere I go across America, people are enjoying beef products, which is great. So we've got really constrained supply and we've got really high demand, and that's driving prices higher. I mean, obviously the higher the cost of beef, there is the potential that it becomes too expensive for some consumers, but the population's growing and the demand and economically things are reasonable for the vast majority of US consumers. So I don't think they're going to suddenly start saying, let's go out for dinner tonight and have some chicken, or they can say, let's go out and have a steak. So I think for the time being, the foreseeable future, the prices are likely to stay reasonably high. For the rancher operator, the decision to buy more cattle or to retain heifers to try and improve and grow the herd, I think we're just seeing the early signs of that starting now. But obviously there's other forces at play there as well, like the weather and weather volatility, where we've still got 25% of the country in a drought. And then we've had other places that have had unprecedented rainfall. So if you're a rancher thinking, do I buy more cattle at high prices to try and build my herd again? That's a risk assessment. Will I have the grass? Will I have the pastures to feed them? Will I have to buy feed? Because feed prices are expensive. So it's challenging for ranchers to rebuild aggressively in this market, which again means there's less supply and therefore the prices continue to go higher. It's probably a sensible sideways movement in the price over the next 12 or 18 months, and some better weather and rainfall across parts of the country would allow for ranchers to start rebuilding, and then we might see some easing of the prices on that basis. And of course, if the Mexico border opens up again, then that will also help.
And we keep hearing reports, Andrew, that consumers just keep paying the higher prices. There has not been a slowdown in demand.
And, then we've got Instagrammers who are promoting red meat diets, and that's contributed to a lot of the younger generation seeing beef as a healthy protein alternative. There's a whole bunch of reasons why I think that the market has grown and expanded, and that's great for American ranchers and it's good for the economy. So long may it continue.
When it comes to trade and tariffs with regard to the beef industry, what say you on that, Andrew?
Well, lots been said about trade and tariffs, and as the government of the day is seeking to level the playing field a little. Obviously, at the moment, America is an importer of some beef products, primarily processing beef or grinding beef, because you've got a very large population that's really reasonably affluent who like eating beef products. And the US herd is primarily a sort of premium grade product, so it's growing beef for steaks and other prime cuts and high quality uses. So America's importing beef from places like Australia and Brazil and some other locations. So the tariffs obviously on those countries are going to force those prices of that grinding beef that's really needed for the burger chains and the Taco Bells and others of this world who are using a lot of grinding beef, because it simply can't be sourced in America. That lower grade processing beef is just not readily available at the volume that is needed to meet the demands of the US consumer. So obviously countries that have got a higher tariff like Brazil, that beef is likely to go elsewhere and not come into the United States, and then there'll be other countries that will supplant that supply into the US if they can. But otherwise, I think that poses another threat to further price increases in beef products.
Anything else you would like to mention here today, Andrew, whether it be with regard to Ranchbot or the cattle industry in general?
It's a great time for ranchers. I think we hear a lot about smaller ranchers getting out of the business. I think if they want to stay in it, and they want to have ranching as a part of their lifestyle, they need it to make money, then they're going to need to think about innovation and doing things differently for their business operations so that they can make money, no matter whether the price is high like it is today or whether it's 15 or 20% lower than it is today. Technology is going to be the key to them surviving and those businesses thriving. If we look at all other industries on the planet, they've all adopted significant technology to evolve, and agriculture and ranching might be the slowest to have done that. We now really have an imperative to do it. The overarching macroeconomic theme here is that we need to produce a lot more food between now and 2050, and we need to reduce wastage of food. But ranchers across the country will need to be producing more with the available land and water resources they have. And the only way we're going to successfully do that is by innovating and using different technology. Just try and do one thing differently this year and next year to improve your operations and to think differently about how you can operate. And obviously, labour shortages, expensive labour, high fuel costs, wear and tear on motor vehicles, and a distinct lack of time are all large problems that can be solved with remote monitoring solutions like Ranchbot. So try something different and continue to build a better business, because I don't think the demand for beef products is going away anytime in my lifetime.
On that, Andrew, we will wrap up the show today. Thank you so much for being my guest. Again, Andrew Coppin, he is a cattle industry specialist and co-founder and CEO of Ranchbot. I'm Lorrie Boyer for Successful Farming.
Thank you to our guest today, Andrew Coppin, for sharing your expertise on today's cattle industry. Also, thank you to today's sponsor, Morton Buildings. For more information like this, visit agriculture.com. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. You can also follow Successful Farming on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Be sure to check out our other podcasts as well. 15 Minutes with a Farmer and Successful Farming Daily, wherever you get your podcasts.